Welcome to another Naxos live stream. I'm Raymond, and I'm joined today by two very special guests, violinist Tianwa and conductor Märkl, who just did a marvelous recording of the Prokofiev, the two violin concertos, and Tianwa recorded the Sonata for Solo Violin. And you can see them on the screen. Welcome, Tianwa. Welcome, Jun. Tianwa's in Germany. Jun is in Taiwan. And I am in lovely, sunny San Juan, Puerto Rico. And I think to start, we'll see a brief video of during the recording sessions, and then we'll chat with these wonderful artists. Wow, what a wonderful introduction to this recording. Tianwa, you've done something over 20 recordings for Naxos now, and it's your 15th anniversary of working with the label. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
How do you decide what music to record? I'm asking because you've recorded Castelnuovo Tedesco and Sarasate and Piazzolla, Wolfgang Rihm. How do you decide what you want to record?
Well, it's always a conversation between me and Naxos, between me and Klaus Heymann.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say the first CD I did for Naxos, the Sarasate, the Spanish dances, that was an idea from Klaus actually, and that's how we started. So that was my first CD with Naxos. And later on, of course, I also bring some ideas like the 6 solo sonatas of Eugene Isaïe. That was one of my heart projects I really wanted to do, as well as the compositions of Wolfgang Rihm, because I'm a big fan of Wolfgang Rihm's music. So it's always like a conversation between us, between Naxos and me, and of course, it also depends a little bit on the catalog, what Naxos think is now also good for the catalog to just, to record some new pieces or some new recordings.
So you played these pieces, I think you were 16. It was the Munich State Opera Orchestra.
The second violin concerto, yes.
The second violin concerto. So how has that piece changed for you since you played it when you were much younger? So has the piece kind of changed for you as you've experienced a lot of other things?
Well, I think the piece doesn't change, but I change for the piece.
Right.
Yeah. Well, actually, that was quite a memorable concert, of course, because I was 16 and I just started to study in Germany when I played this concerto in Munich. And that was also my big German debut when I was 16. So that was a very exciting moment when I, went on the stage, and especially the second Prokofiev violin concerto, it starts with the solo violin as an opening. So that was something very, also for me, very, very important moment in my life. And then there were some years that I didn't play this concerto.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, every time when I go back to this concerto, I try to, just look into the music as if it's completely new. And there's always something you can read new, or you can see from a different side from different angle and try to use the phrases differently. So that's always something very challenging, but also something I think the most beautiful thing about music is it changes every day, or you change every day. Then you see the music differently.
So why don't we listen to a little bit of the first movement of the second concerto, because that's what you first played with an orchestra, the Prokofiev, and then we'll come back and talk to you. It's such a beautiful opening.
Yes.
I love that opening. June, I'm really struck by the orchestration when I listen to these concertos. It just seems like such a conversation between the violin and the orchestra, and it works so well. What does Prokofiev do? I mean, to make that work.
First of all, he uses a quite small orchestra. So that keeps the orchestra sound very flexible, and we can kind of get much more of this chamber music feeling, being close and reacting just to the subtle differences. Now, what we were trying in this recording was look very carefully for the blend of sound and colors between solo violin and orchestra. And I was very lucky and happy with these ORF orchestra because they are extremely flexible and they have a lot of passion and goodwill, and so they just really dug into that. And like the very beginning, when you just have this melodic thing in the solo violin, and it's nothing more than just a fifth and a sixth raising up and going down, and then the orchestra with a lower color, darker color takes it over. Somehow you need to connect this, and I hope that this we succeeded in doing this and just really creating a strong connection, because sometimes you hear these recordings where you think the orchestra is in a different room from the solo concert from the solo instrument, and in this repertoire, both Prokofiev violin concerti, then there is this not only from the point of composition the structure of the motives and the connection, but also just from the pure sound, from the tenderness of sound and lightness of sound. That has to be really close, and I hope we succeeded.
Well, I think you did. You did wonderfully because it really sounds like a conversation between people, between friends, in the same place. That's such a lovely, lovely feeling. Tianwa, the first concerto. Tell me a little bit about that. It begins really quietly, and it's kind of just opens up. When did you first play that? The first concerto?
Oh, that's a good question. I can't really remember. But indeed, I think I first played the second Prokofiev concerto before I started with the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the beginning of the first concerto, of the first movement, is just something very magic about it.
Mm-hmm.
It has this incredible, some colors that you can't really describe, and how it gets developed, into the music and gets dramatic and more dramatic. And also there are some themes that are very, in a way, playful and dancing, and then you have this very, very dramatic and very heavy sometimes this part of the violin solo, which I also love very much.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it's a piece of a lot of contrast, a lot of colorful changes within short times. Yeah, so it's lovely concert, of course.
Why don't we listen to the opening of that, the first movement? We'll get to, the other movements, but that's also such a beautiful beginning.
Yes.
really is music. It seems full of surprises. You know, it kind of unfolds in a lot of different directions. Prokofiev was a pianist, but he writes, I think, it sounds to me, really well for violin. Tianwa, what are the challenges in playing Prokofiev on the violin?
Well, for me, indeed, I think the most challenging thing is to produce the different color of the sound.
Mm-hmm.
Especially actually in the second violin concerto, there are some passages that you have to work really hard to get the sound that you want for this passage. I mean, of course, everyone has different taste when when every violinist play the same passage, but I find it quite demanding. I see the passage, I see the harmony, I see how the orchestration is written, and I have a kind of a sound, idea in my head, and it's not so easy to get it out of the violin for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit similar as like Robert Schumann's music. Also, sometimes the sound is not immediately there, what you are wishing for the music for, and you have to work on it. But it's a big challenge, as it's also a very very nice thing to work on, because it opens up also even more different possibilities what you can get from the violin.
June, the Prokofiev, I mean, all of these pieces really, to me, they seem like it's Prokofiev as a melodic composer. He writes such great melodies. You hear it in the violin concertos. You hear it in the ballets too, in the symphonies. But there's also something kind of surprising about the melodies sometimes. You know, you think they're going one way, and then they develop in a way you don't expect.
Yes.
How does
you
go ahead?
Yeah, I think what we just heard, the beginning of the first concerto, that's a wonderful example of the melodic quality Prokofiev has. And as you said before, he was a pianist, so the piano is not really the instrument for the melodic part, huh? So it's amazing that in this early piece already he has this mastership. So what he does is he first of all constructs the melodies on very simple intervals, and then he raises expectations how it should move on, and then he's playing with our expectations. So he's not only just kind of writing something just for himself. He's always thinking about the listener. So he's anticipating where we would think it would go. And then sometimes he's fulfilling this, sometimes it's just leading us somewhere else. So it's very, yes, playful. And that's probably one thing. And the second thing is he is audacious sometimes in his harmonic ways. So he builds something and you think it's quite conventional. I know this from so much music before. And then he introduces a couple of notes, pitches, which are leading to somewhere different. It could be in the harmony, so vertically, but it's quite often also within the melodic line. There's one note. Maybe sometimes it's a little bit difficult to accept this note in that melodic line, but then it leads to a surprising moment and a very beautiful moment. And so he keeps the attention always alive from us, because we cannot just close your eyes and just play it. No, you have to be very awake, very active, and then also with the listener. And that's probably one of the secrets of this period Prokofiev has. And then it's the variety of textual structures he can offer. When you listen to this beginning, he has just this incredible tremolo. And tremolo is just nothing more than just an atmosphere. But with this tremolo, he leads kind of under the then solo violin. She starts and plays her melodic line, but you have this atmosphere, tremolo always beneath, and then the blend with the clarinet and the flute. And so again, these chamber music accompanying or leading voice, sometimes you don't know who is leading. Is it solo violin or is it the solo flutes and or clarinet? And this is really, yeah, entertaining in the best sense. Yeah, so dialogue. Yeah. So he is a real master.
I'd like to play a bit of the. So sorry, you cut out for a minute. Please finish.
No, that's wonderful.
I'd like to play a bit of the. I want to play a bit of the opening of the second movement of the second violin concerto, which is just, it shows so much of what we've been talking about, the sense of melody, but also the incredible orchestration. It kind of gives space for the violin, but it also, you know, it does it with such skill, and the skill is not something that it's there, but it's not the point. It's just he writes so effortlessly for orchestra. So if we could have a bit of the second movement of the second violin concerto, which, by the way, is one of my favorite pieces of all time. Ah, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Tianwa, you've also recorded the sonata for solo violin, and he kind of throws everything he possibly can at the violin in that relatively short sonata. What was that like to learn for you?
Well, actually, this sonata is not very often played. I mean, of course, in the 20th century, we have a lot of great works for solo violin written, like almost in the same period. You have this great big Bartók solo sonata, of course, for violin. And yeah, so actually, I also didn't have very much chance to play. I've played a few times in concert, this solo sonata. And what I find really interesting is that actually this is the the latest work of Prokofiev, comparing, to the concertos. And so it's years later. It's written 1947. And right after, the end of the Second World War and all this, tragic in that time. But it's a very positive piece. And it's very bright. Of course, it's brilliant, but it's not extremely unplayable, difficult.
Mhm.
It's more just like, it's brilliant, but it's a joyful and very, very positive piece. Short, but brilliant. And it gives you really a good mood when you practice it. So that's also interesting, how when he gets older, he still, change in his way, how he composes.
Do you have a favorite movement?
From the sonata?
Yeah.
Phew. I mean, if we should hear this now, maybe just the beginning of the first, because that's exactly what I mean with, this very positive start and very brilliant start. Just like, you open up the window and you have a really nice weather and summer.
It's a 4-minute movement. Why don't we listen to the whole thing?
Okay. Yes. Sure.
It really gives a great sense of the piece, but also of you.
Okay. Yes. Pleasure.
Boy, that's great. It's absolutely wonderful. It's hard to believe that he wasn't a violinist sometimes because he writes so well for the instrument.
Yeah, definitely. It's also so yeah, it's so good to the violin, and also all these notes and runs. It just works very well. Also, yeah. So
Amazing. Well, he did obviously understand the instruments of the orchestra very well, and you hear that in his orchestration.
mm,
June, I'm a former French horn player, professional French horn player, and I know that different composers present different challenges. So, what are the challenges that Prokofiev makes for the orchestra?
Yes, there are a couple of unique things. Um, Sometimes he can be really virtuoso, so demanding really very, very difficult stuff from the orchestra. But especially in this solo concerto, they should sound really light, no no indication of difficulty. Um, he uses quite extreme ranges sometimes, like when you go for the tuba we have in this piece, or a couple of flute parts and so on. It's pretty low, it's pretty high, and it's pretty difficult to play. But um, that's, I think, real mastership, when you have difficult passages and they sound just so easy. And that's some. There was a wonderful thing with Tianwa that you never feel it's difficult. She
mm,
just plays it so wonderfully and technically without any problem. Even when we played it the 20th time in the recording session, it was always marvelous. And also the orchestra was really good. And so that's, I think, is one thing. And Prokofiev also demands, beside the technical difficulties, a color and quality of sound at the same time. So he's not waiting that we come into a comfortable range and then you can switch on your nice color. No, he wants to have it also in the most unusual ranges. And that's quite demanding for the orchestra, but that's part of the fun and enjoyment of that music.
June, was this the first time you'd worked with the ORF orchestra?
Yes, and I'm sure not the last time.
Well,
Was
I hope not for either of you.
yeah. It was a wonderful experience, and I'm really impressed about how she did that, because you just have to imagine. Maybe most of our, let's say, fans and friends do not realize how stressful recording sessions can be,
Hmm.
and you are under pressure and you play your heart out, and then those guys in the sound box tell you, well, you can't use that. It was kind of somebody dropped his pencil, or kind of a chair was just making some noise, yeah, things like this. And then you start and play the next time your heart out, and it's again something, huh? And somebody turned his music to the page too loudly. And then there was a mistake in some instrument. So after the 10th time, you're just completely worn out, and you give up hope that we are getting a result, and we still only in the first 10 bars, huh? Something like this. So it can be extremely stressful, and I have, for good luck, not for Naxos, but I've seen colleagues, they just kind of had to give up in recording sessions. And so, under these circumstances, our goal is to play music as we would play in the concert hall. One chance, and it should be
Hmm.
really kind of flowing. You shouldn't feel that this is a studio recording. That is should be like, yeah, you're playing your heart out, and that's difficult, and that's wonderful what Tianwa did, what the orchestra did, and so we had a really very, very enjoyable moment there in these recording sessions.
Tianwa, you're nodding like you
yes,
agree.
absolutely. Yeah, that's pretty exact on the point. How you described how studio recordings feel like. definitely. I mean, when you repeat, sometimes for different reasons, you repeat, and it's still every next time should sound just like you are playing this only for the first time and the most fresh and the most hearted one. So that's the most difficulty, of course. Not only for the soloist, but also for the conductor and also for the whole orchestra, of course, for everyone. So challenge.
But this is an orchestra. They're a radio orchestra. They are used to recording too, right? I mean,
Yes, but they are typical radio orchestras, and they sound like this. And this I do not mean in a positive sense. It just sounds like you are playing for safety, and you don't dare to go to the extreme because it might be that your horn might crack, and then you can throw it on. Yeah. So, but we don't want to have this safety playing. We want to take the risk and go for it, and because the music is extreme, the expression is extreme. Otherwise, it wouldn't mean anything for us if that would be just normal. Prokofiev is looking for the extraordinary moment, and that we have to recreate, and we have to take the risks. And it's difficult when you take the same risk for the 10th time, but still, that's what we have to do. And sometimes recording sessions end in a real big crash and disagreement of players and soloists and so. But it was a good sign. We could look at the end. We could be very friendly and say, "Oh, we are sorry, it's over already." So a good sign.
Absolutely.
So are you all going to do more concerts together?
Yeah, we're trying. Now COVID is a little bit depressing for all of us, and all our planning had been kind of all over the place, but not where it should be. But of course, we're working on that.
Well, June, it sounds like you're spending your entire life in quarantine right now.
Yeah, but I'm doing quarantine to be able to play concert after the quarantine, and this is maybe the chance.
So it gives you what, 2 or 3 weeks to study scores?
Yes. I mean, quarantine. These times, you have to be flexible. You have to think, what can I do the best out of this situation? And usually quarantine is something extremely negative and lonely also. So I just take the time, and as Tianwa said in the beginning, I'm trying to do all the repertoire I'm doing, and also those works which I'm doing for the I don't know, 50th time, like from scratch, and so restudying as I would do the piece for the first time. And then I find new things, I find good things, and I just think, why didn't I see that before? Maybe because I didn't have the quarantine and the time to really spend there. And so, in this sense, it could be a good thing to get more depth in your performance, in your interpretation, and to study more profoundly.
It reminds me of a story of Leopold Stokowski, who for years, and perhaps his whole life, when he traveled across the Atlantic, would do it by boat. And somebody estimated he spent 2 years of his life on a ship going back and forth. Now, he lived to be almost 100 years old, and somebody said, well, isn't that a waste? And he said, no, where do you think I studied scores? It was on the 2-week trip on the boat. So, Tianwa, how has the quarantine affected you?
Well, not much until now, because since the COVID situation also started in Europe, I'm more or less stuck in Europe where I live. I used to travel really quite a lot, also to Asia, to America. And in 2019, I was for the first time in a big tour also in Australia. I played in Sydney in the Opera House, which was a great experience. And then suddenly comes COVID, so traveling is not that easy anymore. And also because I also teach as a professor in Germany, in Würzburg, at the university. And of course, it's also very important for me that I can support, young people, the next generation, so called, my students. So it's for me almost impossible to just leave during the semester to stuck somewhere in quarantine for 3 weeks.
Right.
And actually, this week, almost today, I was supposed to play with the Buffalo Philharmonic, which is already a postponed date from last year, but I still can't make it. Traveling and visa issues. So yeah, it's been quite a challenging time, and also requires a lot of flexibility. All the dates and plans required to be, but I hope soon we will get life back to normal again, and it won't be a problem anymore. But right now, yeah, I'm more or less most of the time in Europe and
Well,
playing concerts here. Yeah.
if that date when that date in Buffalo gets set again, let me know. I will drive up from New York City to hear you.
Yes, definitely. We're talking about dates, but it's probably next season or even maybe later, because it's still not quite easy to see how it can, with the visa and travel restrictions. So we're working on that.
So what have you been recording, Tianwa? I know you've been busy.
Sorry, say it again.
I know you've been in the recording studio. What have you been working on?
Oh, right. Yes. Actually, a few weeks ago, I did the latest or the newest recording for Naxos again. I was recording with my pianist Niklas Rimmer. We recorded the 4 violin sonatas for violin piano from George Antheil.
Wow.
An American composer.
Very interesting
guy, very in a way crazy, but of course very interesting guy. And he wrote 4 violin sonatas, and they are really exciting and interesting and not played. I mean, of course, if someone knows about the sonatas, then probably the second one, which is the shortest one, and also the quite dramatic one with drums at the end. But yeah, we're doing this recording, and it was a bit fun to do that. And also, Niklas Rimmer and I recorded last year the 3 sonatas by Robert Schumann, and that one is also in editing now, and we look forward to the next release.
Well, that sounds great. I look forward to the George Antheil. My apologies. They've decided that for some reason somebody has to drill a hole in the wall somewhere in this building this morning, and I guess this is live stream. Somebody's decided to drill a hole in the wall. June, I'm sure you're busy too. What recording plans do you have?
I'm kind of, I have a couple of projects also with Naxos, but the most current one is now I'm recording a bigger project around Sanson, and the French composer. And Sanson has written a lot of stuff, but a few are only recorded. And so I'm just trying to take care of all those things which are not yet recorded, or just last recording is long ago. And so the next project will be just at the beginning of the next coming year in Den Haag with the Residency Orchestra, and then we will just go for wonderful music out of ballet music, out of operas. And so that will be then already the 5th CD of this cycle of around Sanson.
You recorded, it was a while ago, you recorded the overtures of Albert Lortzing. I want to say thank you. I played in a small opera orchestra in Germany and fell in love with Lortzing, and nobody in North America seems to know who he is. And he's a fantastic composer.
And he was a kind of all-round genius for theater. Huh? He was an opera director and an actor and a singer and a very good and very skillful composer. So the stuff he wrote is really good, very nice to hear and never played again, because it's the operas are a little bit stuck in the time. They
Yeah.
had a lot of critics for the especially problems of society with the count and the people and the farmers and so on. And these times, times have changed. We have the same problems, but now the names of those people are different, and so we are forgetting about those operas. But the overtures are still wonderful, and they're there, they're playable, and was a great suggestion by Naxos to record them.
Well, I'm glad they did. I think it's lovely music. Let's go back to Prokofiev for a minute, and let's finish with Prokofiev. I want to play some of the final movement of either the first concerto or the second concerto. But first of all, I'd like to see if there are any questions from people listening. And while we get questions lined up from the listeners, I want to play another movement from the solo sonata. Give people a chance to send in their questions or whatever. And why don't we play the third movement of the solo sonata? No, let's play this. No, let's play the second. That's the theme and variations, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's such a great movement. So let's play the second movement from the solo sonata and gather up some questions. Oh, that's wonderful. We've had a few questions come in, and I think we've got time for 3 or 4 of them. So first, Tianwa, somebody's asking, when did you start playing and who was your first teacher? So where did you start out with the violin?
I started when I was about 4, a little bit more than 4. Actually, it was quite a coincidence. My parents brought me to a kindergarten, and that happens to be a kindergarten with, they were training little kids, getting some musical educations. So we could sing in choir, and I also started with piano. And then later, because my parents didn't have the money to buy a piano, and we also didn't have that much place or space in our apartment for a piano, so they bought me a violin, and that's how I started. And so I started actually playing like this Suzuki system, starting in the kindergarten, playing in group.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, of course, I had a private teacher a few months later, who was great with kids, and that's how I started.
Wonderful. So somebody asked the same question about you, June, but it's something that's interested me. So how did you become a conductor? I mean, we see instrumentalists and we see competitions and we see, but when you play an instrument, it seems more obvious. So how did you become a conductor?
Yes, I started at when I was 4. I started with the violin. That's how I started conducting. Yeah, and then when I was 5, I did the piano, and because my parents were professional musicians playing exactly those instruments, and I made my musical experiences. And the thing what I really loved most about music making was making music together with others in ensembles, in orchestra, in chamber music. And so I didn't love so much playing just the piano for myself. And so this joy in playing together with others in a team, that made me getting into this conducting thing. And I still, there's still my attitude in conducting, trying to be member of a team.
I think that really shows through. I mean, this recording, in the sound of the recording, but also in the video, it seems like there's a team there. And you were working with, who is the producer? Johannes Kernmeier?
Yep.
Okay, so he was part of the team too.
Yeah, definitely was.
So, Tianwa, how do you go about finding? Sorry, there's dogs here now, so I can't change that. How do you go about finding all of these unknown pieces? I'm thinking of the Anteil, and June, I'm also thinking of some of the pieces you've recorded, which are relatively unknown. So, if something's not particularly well known, where do you go to find out about it? Let's start with you, Tianwa.
Wow, we are lucky in living in a time that you have the internet. So from one researching about some maybe more known repertoire, and I suddenly see a name pop in the biography of this composer, and I'm just curious about, okay, who's this guy? I never heard about it. And that's where sometimes I look for new repertoires, and I also love to do programs, especially for my reciters, solo or with piano. I love to do programs that has some, not just putting some wonderful pieces together, but also to try to have a conception of those pieces, why they are linked to each other, and why it's good to put them together into one program, what relationship those composers have with each other. So that's where I usually sometimes spend many time reading, also in books, of course, but internet is, of course, very easy that you can search for those informations. So that's how I look for new repertoire. I'm always very intrigued and very interested in things that we don't know yet, and also the question, of course, why we don't know them yet. Is there a reason, or is just somehow they were forgotten?
June, what about you?
Yeah, maybe I can say the first 25 years of my career, I spent most of the time just trying to understand the standard repertoire
Hmm.
and, of course, contemporary music. But then I thought maybe I should try to dig deeper into one composer or one period of time. That was the time when I had this job as music director of the Lyon National Orchestra. And then I started to dig into Debussy. I produced this 9 CD box for Naxos, and everything about Debussy, what an orchestra can play, is in that box. And so I did a lot of research, starting from letters, personal letters, and things people have not yet discovered, and to kind of arrangements of his pieces and facsimiles and all this kind of stuff. And now then I changed and said that, okay, I have done this. I need a new challenge. And then I came up with this Sanson idea. And I said, okay, there is so much music, um, which is really nice, good music, well done and pleasant to listen to, but nobody can hear it. So then I said, okay, I devote my time in going into one corner and trying to discover things and put it on this platform, Naxos. And Naxos is perfect for this. And they are also, as a company, are well known for unknown repertoire.
Hmm.
And so that was also a good combination. And that's also something I want to do more and more, just giving us, all of us, the opportunity to understand more facets, more parts, more also repertoire from different periods in their process of working, of different composers we think we know, but there's a lot probably we don't know yet. And so just I think it's, for me, it's, I go for one thing and dig into, I change to the next thing. And so
We have one final question, time for one final question. That's from Alan Barnes, who writes, this is for both Tianwa and Maestro Märkl. One gets the impression that you both spent a great deal of time prior to the recording session working together to get a unified interpretation. Was this the case? So did you spend a lot of time before the recording session talking, working together? Because it really sounds like you're one team.
Tiano, you want to, or should I answer?
Please, please.
Okay, I mean, we definitely have spent time together working on this thing, on this repertoire. And for me, it's kind of a special situation with the solo concerto. I am very kind of open to what the soloist would suggest and try to adapt and create the environment that she can do the best of her interpretation. Of course, I have also some suggestions to make, um, and see how we can fit together. And that was a very happy coincidence that that worked well. I think it's maybe not that we have spent weeks before together, but it was kind of the intensity. And this working together was not just before the recordings. Yes, we have done that, of course, but then also during the recordings.
Mm-hmm.
We always checked, and I checked also when she even didn't realize that I was checking on her and seeing, oh, what is she doing, and is she now changing or whatever? Because as a conductor, I have to give the upbeat. I have to be one beat before the actual sound is there.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, it works really well. In others, it doesn't. And this was one of the very happy cases. So where you can, it's kind of like you find friends on the podium.
Yes.
Tianwa, so how was it for you?
Yes, definitely. I mean, of course, we talked about the concertos before the recording session started, and it was a very nice work together to talk about the compositions. But also, I totally agree. It's not only about, well, it's not only functioning about working a lot together, but it's also, of course, you as if you do a interpretation together, you more or less have to have the same way of viewing this composition of this composer. And I'm very lucky to find Maestro Märkl, who I have the feeling that, more or less we have a very common way of seeing this music. And I'm very lucky about on this, of course. I mean, of course, it could be completely different. And that's also something very interesting sometimes when you have this completely clash and you have to try to find a compromise together. And it can be also something very, very interesting and very challenging. But I think here I'm very lucky that Maestro Märkl has this, for me, very understanding way of seeing this music, and it was absolutely also the way how I see Prokofiev's music.
Yeah, thank you, Tianwa. Isn't that a nice recommendation to Naxos to have us for
Yes.
more recording lined up?
Yes, definitely. Listen, we're at the end of our live stream. I think to go out, we'll play the ending of the second movement, or the ending of the third movement of the second violin concerto. But before we do that, when I used to work in radio, every Friday, the host would say, "Credit where credit is due," which means thank you to the people that make this possible. So Tianwa, thank you so much for joining us from Germany. Jun, thank you so much for joining us from Taiwan. Thanks for the technical assistance from Jesse in Tennessee and Gabriela in Bangkok. And I am in sunny Puerto Rico. And thank you all who are listening. It's been a lovely discussion. And most of all, Tianwa and Jun, thank you for the recording. It's absolutely wonderful. And it's a gift to all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for your time, and what a wonderful time.
And you have to record again so we can do this again.
Yes,
Sure.
definitely.
With great pleasure.
Yes.
Good. Here's a bit more music, and thank you all.
Thanks.